I'm going to call this part 2 of Chris Harder, really the takeaways.
Yeah.
Chris was so gracious with his time, and he's extremely busy, but to have him in studio in the office was awesome for me. I mean, just because
it was awesome for me too. It's like, okay, he's a real person.
Yeah, it's kind of celebrity status in the influencer world.
You've been talking about him for years, so I'm like, oh my God, you do exist.
He does exist.
Yeah.
He does exist.
Yeah.
So I just thought it'd be really cool after that conversation just to have a little bit of takeaway from that, because there was so many like ridiculous nuggets. And guys, if you have not listened to it, go back and listen to it.
For sure.
It was amazing.
I mean, I almost wonder like if what we're talking about right now should be before or after, because you know Chris so well already that I almost feel like we skipped over sharing kind of where he came from. Like he went broke, he lost everything, like, you know, and for him to be where he's at now is like that's the other piece too that we didn't talk about as much, but the guy's been there. I mean, he's been rock bottom.
Well, Chris comes from, so let's go down the story, you know, Chris comes from the lending industry.
Yeah.
2008, I always remember him telling the stories, and there's some of them are really heartwarming and some of them are like kind of funny, but you know, he worked for US Bank, and you know, he was one of the ones responsible for going around the country and shutting branches down, and you know, in the lending business, his brother Nick worked there as well. So he had to go around the country and pretty much tell people, sorry, we're shutting down shop. And then finally, you know, he was out of a job and starting over.
Yeah.
You know, and we share a lot of that starting over from that market
I know.
and what it did.
Yeah. Did you know about his past when you signed up for his mastermind? Were you already that's what's crazy is that you have gone through the very similar. I mean, same timing and everything.
The way we were introduced was it's such a funny story. And I would encourage people to take away from this funny story that to not let things stand in your way from kind of the gut check. So it was literally Labor Day weekend, and I was cleaning my office. It was obviously messy because I listened to an entire audiobook. And so
was it a Dr. Seuss book?
No, it was not a Dr. Seuss. So it was Lewis Howes. I don't know who recommended the book, but he wrote a book called The School of Greatness. And I listened to the whole thing, and Lewis has an incredible story. He's like a ridiculous podcaster. So he's doing this event in Columbus, Ohio. And I came out of the room, told Wendy, I'm going to Columbus, Ohio. And she's like, what the fuck is in Columbus, Ohio? I'm like, well, this influencer, which I just listened to his book, was really good, and I'm going to go. I don't know anybody. I don't know what the influencer world is.
Yeah.
And this was 5 years ago. So I did. I went not knowing anybody, and it was his second Summit of Greatness. And that year, you know, again, people I didn't know who are very prominent names now was like Brandon Bouchard, Jay Shetty was there, like just
so cool, crazy
people, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm in this, and I forget the name of it. I don't know why I forget the name of it. This really cool old building that's a theater, and Lewis always goes back to his hometown to do this intentionally. It's cool old theater. There's only like 900 people there the first year. And I just start meeting people. And I met this gal, Jigme Love, which, yes, that is her name, Jigme Love. And she's telling me her crazy story at the bar, and I'm telling her about, you know, contribution and giving goals. She's like, oh, I've got to introduce you to Chris Harder. I'm like, I don't know who Chris Harder is. So eventually that weekend, she introduces me to Chris. He's like, oh, yeah, I'd love to have you on my podcast. I'm like, whoa, me be on a podcast? That was the first podcast I'd ever been on. It was episode 75. But that was where Chris and I really connected, was the giving and his tagline of, you know, when good people make great money, they do great things.
Yep. And
that was kind of where my journey started outside of the real estate space.
Yeah. That's cool. I think, he's just such a really down-to-earth person, like super unassuming, just open, honest. I feel like so many of his answers were super thoughtful. You know, I love that he identifies as an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a strategist. Mm-hmm. And I think it was just really cool, too, that he was able to kind of open up about real estate in terms of just from a business aspect, like the things he sees. And I think it's so funny, so contrarian. He does not believe in buying real estate. I mean, wow, it was so bananas. But then for him to hear like his perspective on it.
Yep.
But so you get to meet him, and I mean, that was like 5 years ago, and he even talked about it today, your appearance on his podcast.
Yeah.
And that he literally refers to you every month from that podcast.
Yep. Just about, creating contributions. So we talk about it in one of the podcasts about the goals that are missing is, what's your contribution? What do you want to contribute? Which means I have to make X amount of money in order to make my contribution goals. We always look at it in percentages. So if you want to give $10,000 this year, you got to make 100 to give that 10.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, for me, it comes from a tithing standpoint, from being in church for my whole life. For some people, it's just finding a percentage. You might have different things you want to give to. So Chris and I have always had that. He's real big with Pencils of Promise, which is a really cool charity where they build schools in like Ghana and some other places. That's been a big charity that he's been tied to in their galas and things. But he's just, he's a very down to earth. Like if you met him on the street or like you didn't, like you'd never know.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's net worth is ridiculous. And he's just a down to earth person.
Totally. I loved when he talked about, like the monetization of his mastermind, how much it costs, just like super open about it. And what that costs, $40,000. I mean, that's legit,
a serious investment,
right? And for him to be able to share why he feels so confident about that and how he got to that place of being able to say like, here's why, and what a motivating factor it is for him to help people 10X their lives.
Well, I think that's really important because I know some of the people that I've coached in the past, when they're willing to write a very large check for your time, you want to show up and deliver 110% of that value, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure they get every penny out of it, because when you're the person writing the check to that person, which I do every year to Chris, I don't want him showing up halfway, because then you feel, and I've been in masterminds where I'm like, I paid a lot of money for this and I don't feel like I'm getting my values worth.
Totally.
And
everybody listening could probably comment on something they've paid for where they feel like they didn't get their money's worth.
But if you listen further into that podcast, when Chris and I are talking about investing, when Chris talked about, hey, interview, get some testimonials, find some people, I think too many times we look at shiny object and somebody did really good building a landing page and videos and this, that, and the other that they hire.
Yeah.
Look, real estate's a great example. People have figured out how to package some shit up. It looks really good.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, the client's really unhappy
it's very
with
glossy.
it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think for him, he's very passionate about making sure that people feel like they did get something out of it. Like how connected he is to everybody's stories and their experiences, I thought was pretty awesome. A lot of times you can ask people that lead a mastermind to talk about success stories, and they can't really, because they're in it from the front end and they deliver information, but they don't necessarily circle it back, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that about what he shared. And I love their perspective on rituals, his routine.
Yep. Yeah, his routine was, that's made a huge impact on my life, is just finding a routine that works. He went through the routine thing where it's like you listen to podcasts and you listen to these people that are like gun-ho on, you got to be at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. club and do this. I think ritual even changes with life. I used to be one of those people that I was up at 4 to the gym doing those things. And over this last year, and I don't know if it's because of the lack of alcohol in my system or whatnot, but my routines have changed where I want a different day now where I'm not getting up with an alarm clock. I'm going to the gym when I get up, which might be at 7 o'clock. It might be at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
It just depends.
Yeah.
The only 2 days a week that I'm really scheduled, or 3 days, is like when I'm playing racquetball,
day.
I've got to be there. And the days like on Sundays when we go hiking at a certain time. So it's not, I don't want to get there at 10. It's too freaking late, especially this time of year.
I'll be like by myself as a trailhead again.
Right. But I think also on routine wise is that if you're setting boundaries and really looking at like sprinting through that portion of your day from like 10 to 6 or whatnot, that's when I've been trying to set my appointments and my calls and things, is like, this is when it's game on. But until then, I need this space for myself, my family, personal time, whatever it is.
And I feel like he's very compartmentalized when you talked about his routine. So it's very purpose driven. And also, like I always think of boundaries as like has a negative connotation, but it's really just about setting things up that are for your enjoyment. Like the way he's like, it's non-negotiables, the way we've got our routine set up.
Right.
And how they start their day, how they end their day, and then holding a space for that. And then to your point, like when it's work time, it's freaking 100% balls to the wall, go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you don't have the distractions of things, or you're not allowing the distractions.
And you're not hopping back and forth. Like
Right.
that ability to compartmentalize like the task at hand and what you're working on, I think is huge. Because I think that's the hard part for a lot of people too, even when you establish the boundaries, staying focused on what's supposed to be happening in that time frame.
Well, in our industry as well, in the title space, you've got some of these title reps are like, I'm working 18-hour days. Are you really working 18 hours, or are there a bunch of distractions in that 18 hours? My dad used to be really big at that. My dad, swear to God, he would sit at his fucking desk for 20 hours a day. And I'd often wonder, like, what did you allow take away from productive time?
Mm-hmm.
My dad had this huge heart, and I believe Chris has a big heart. But if Chris said yes to everybody that's like, hey, I mean, I can't imagine how many DM requests he gets on a daily basis.
Right.
My dad would always, like, somebody would walk into the office and they'd need like marriage counseling, and the next thing you know, 3 hours out of his day is gone.
Yeah.
And I understand you want to help people, but I think you do have to be cautious about it. And
Awareness.
On that note, because I'm totally like squirrel, because it was one thing that I did not get to bring up to him that I've also learned from him is he does not consume social media. He only contributes. So some of us spend a lot of time consuming what everybody puts out,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't spend enough time contributing. And so thinking about what are you contributing to your audience, as he started talking about personal brand and value, that's the cool thing about Instagram, Facebook, any of these platforms is that it's your place to contribute and add value and become that personal brand.
Yeah. Yeah. He was very, his ability to articulate very specific things like on the fly like that was pretty impressive. It just tells you that he's very sure of how he's doing things. But I also don't think that he's like rigid. I think that he's open. So like, here's how we do things today. Here's how it's working. But I think that there's probably always this awareness for how he could evolve.
There's no ego to who he is or what he does.
Yeah.
He is very genuine on helping people get from, like in the Elite Entrepreneur Mastermind, it's entrepreneurs that are making 7 figures, proof on P&Ls, and getting to the next level.
Yeah.
And so he's very big on getting these people to that level and making sure that not only figuring out when he talks about being a strategist, we have some of those similarities, right? I want to be a strategist in real estate. I want to get you from point A to point B and help you build your wealth and your legacy through these different strategies. He does the same thing in business, where he can look at the business like he's done on mine and going, hey, I think this wheel in the cog might be missing or it might be loose. And if we adjust this, or I make this connection with this person, we can fix that.
Yeah.
And, he kind of does the 30,000-foot view of the business and says, well, this is what I see.
Yeah. Even when you talked about the sale that they went through and how he looked at that perspective of it, not just being transactional, but the value was in the connection of the people involved to help that still provided a value to them, but also how, what was her name? Francis.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. How she connected dots, right? Purposeful, intentional, but still for everyone's benefit. And how he described that to be a value.
Right.
And I loved when he talked about how when we said, what's the one thing that people need to be doing? And he commented on value and
right, adding value.
Yeah.
So,
and then expanding on what that looks like and how it can look, feel. Is it tangible? Is it not tangible?
Yeah, so what he talked about, Francis or Francine, the agent, she gave him a certificate to Francesca.
Oh my God, I was just going banana. I'm like, what was her name? What was her name?
She wanted to support another local vendor, which, was awesome. And so that's how she added value, but not just to Chris and Lori, but also to that local business.
Right.
And I think that's really important. I think it's one of the things that, you're really awesome out like when we need certain connections for local stuff,
Yeah.
whether it's printers or, web designers.
Printers.
I know any of those things.
Of all the things.
And same thing with us. Like when we get our T-shirts printed, we have a local vendor that we use. And whenever somebody reaches out, I'm like, oh, you got to go here.
Right.
And for me, I'm never one that values price. Like I'm not looking for the cheapest thing. I'm looking for something that's going to be an in-between, but it's also going to benefit somebody locally.
Yeah. Price is only important in the absence of value.
Say that again?
Price is only important in the absence of value.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've never heard that before. So I'm like, I need to think about that more.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's why if people are shopping for things that are not.
I was going to call on Kyle, but his mic's not hooked up.
What do you mean? Call on him for what?
I was going to call him to see what he got out of Chris's podcast.
What's your, I would love to hear what both Kyle and Eden think about Chris today, but what is your number one biggest impact that he's had on you?
As much as I want to take it to the business side, I'm going to say personal. It's no secret. I think probably by the time this airs, today it's 29 days from my 1 year, and I will not say sober. It was a choice to be alcohol free, but it took me several years to get there. But if you ask Chris the same question, there were several years that I broke down in that group that was like, this is an issue. The greatest thing Chris has given me is, number one, being a mentor, but number two, giving me a safe space. So Chris created these rooms with entrepreneurs that were there to support other people, whether it be personal or business. And it wasn't people that you were worried about going and airing your dirty laundry. And that's a hard thing to do, to go get in a room with a bunch of people that you don't know and go, hey, this fucking drinking thing's not really good for me right now, but I'm not sure how to fix it.
Yeah.
And, it took some time, but it's also, what's cool about it is I don't think Chris could go back and go, down the road, my podcast is going to lead to helping somebody get their personal life on track through my mastermind. That wasn't the intent. And I couldn't tell you the impact that I was going to have by making that choice last year on somebody like Chris.
Yeah.
So, that's probably my biggest thing from him is really the personal change this year, but it was, he drove me pretty hard for the last couple of years.
That's awesome. I think it's so interesting about coaching in any capacity is that if you seek mentorship or coaching or mastermind for business, it inherently applies to every sector of your life. If you go see somebody for personal, it affects your business life.
Sure.
So it's, I think the coolest thing about having that group was that you got something out of it that was plus, right?
All the way around.
So from a business sense, the takeaways, just being around, just via osmosis, getting to listen to the people in the room, and then how it impacted you personally, and then it was cool to hear Chris talk about how he's like 90% alcohol free. Right. Right. Because of you.
Yeah. And I wish that there was,
I'm like 40% alcohol free now. Because of you. Thank you.
Because of me. And Tammy said the other day.
And that's because I don't drink with you anymore.
Right. Yeah. I was totally the instigator.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's okay. You know what? Recently, it probably because it's weird we're going off on this tangent.
Did you
but
lose your train of thought?
No. No, but what you said about the alcohol thing is that Eminem, which, is one of my heroes from a couple of different standpoints, his sobriety and his choices, but his song, I'm Not Afraid, he talks about, I had to go to this place to get here, right?
Yeah.
He had to go down that road in order to be here to make that difference. And sometimes we don't realize the things that we're going through have nothing to do with right now. They have to do with the future. And we have to be able to look at, there's going to be something positive that comes out of this.
That's a really great angle, because I also think that everything you're going through today has to do with something that happened yesterday. Yeah. And you have the decision you have the ability to decide how you want tomorrow to look, right?
Right.
So everything that's happening right now has an influence. I mean, basically the future's already here.
Right.
We're already in it, because whatever's happening right now was talked about, experienced, thought about, in some other point in the past, right? So when people are always preparing for something to come, well, it's already here.
Yep.
Right? So,
and sometimes you have to go through those things that, I think about Kyle and Eden, right? They had to go through that first year of experience to figure out what was the next thing.
Oh, and there's going to be so many iterations for them still, right?
Oh, so many. We're not done yet.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a lot for sure. No, I think it was really cool. It was
what
great.
what was your biggest takeaway from Chris?
I think, gosh, there's so many, but for me, it was just kind of, I was in awe at first because you've told me, I mean, I feel like I've learned about him for years through you and then be like, oh my gosh. So I don't know. I mean, I'm very kind of like, whoa, I'm sitting here getting to talk to Chris because of you through a podcast that I had no intention of ever like being your co-host, let alone like get to meet Chris because of that. So I kind of had a moment where I was just sitting there going, this is really cool. Like, who would have thought? Like, I would have never imagined, a year ago or whatever, thinking that we would have a day like this.
Sure.
And I think he's just a really authentic, sharp, honest person. There's nothing that we asked him that he didn't have like a pensive moment before he answered. There was just nothing that was inauthentic. Like, he was just like straight up.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like he's the coolest ZFG ever. In a good way, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I loved his takeaway on when you talked about the confidence that he had putting together his mastermind, being able to like talk about how when he structured it, it was more not necessarily about generating the money, but what that money represented for his responsibility to the people attending.
Yeah.
And I think that was refreshing because I think a lot of people monetize to collect and then forget about the contribution that's due in return.
Well, let's take that to real estate, to title, to anything else that applies in our business. Is that, I mentioned in, when I was kind of thinking, Chris, and going through that, is that Chris delivered an experience like none other. I've been in some other masterminds, been in some other, coaching. Chris delivered value, experience, all the things that I appreciate that keep me coming back every year, making a substantial investment. I think the same thing needs to apply in our own business.
Yeah.
When it comes down to the experience, like, what are you doing to create an experience for a buyer, for a seller, for an investor? I know that I need to do more work on that.
A realtor, right? From the
Right.
title companies.
Right.
Like, how do we make it a better experience for everybody?
How do you make it a better experience, and how do you add value so that those people continue to come back and they continue to refer? I mean, I referred a number of people to Chris's Fast Foundations, because they might not be ready to make this monstrosity investment, but the Fast Foundations is a smaller investment and it gets you outside of the real estate. And, I've had seen some really good takeaways from that. And so I think that you deliver that so that it's something you're always on the tip of the tongue, from the experience.
Yeah. No, he's a pretty phenomenal dude, like really cool dude.
And I'm going to add to that on experience. Experience doesn't always come in the form of monetary gifts and things like that. Experience comes from the way you solve a problem, handle a problem, all those things. And I'm just thinking about, because I know Erica's finishing it up right now, but experience is going to come in this one transaction of, we talk about thinking OTB, and this particular experience for a past client of mine, we sat down on a Sunday. They own a condo free and clear, and they're going to be buying another one that's a 2-bedroom, but there was some lag, right? How are we going to accomplish this if something comes on the market? And of course, 2 hours later, they're driving around finding an open house that's off market. I'm like, okay, so we need to fix this really quick. This is where the experience comes into place. I was able to put a loan against the free and clear property, get this offer accepted over here, so they had cash from this one to put on this one. We sold the other one, and we close on everything today. But that's the experience that really comes to helping people in the business and providing that piece.
That's awesome. That's a great story.
It was a lot more complicated than that, but
it always is.
Always is.
It's always the recap.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the word experience, right? Because there's so many like legs to that. I mean, a great experience could be an awesome conversation. It could be somebody's wisdom. It could be somebody's know-how to maneuver through a transaction. It can be somebody's ability to teach, or mentor, or coach, or and it's all subjective because everybody's definition of a good experience is different.
Well, it goes back to, it's not what you said, it's how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I kind of compare. If you guys don't do this, it's a huge part of my life, and it's funny because I'm seeing it in my kids because we've had so many conversations about it. If you don't walk into a place of business or go on a vacation and think about how your experience was and how you were received, it's a way for you to take that back to your own business. Like, how do I want to apply or not apply this?
Totally.
You know, Chase is working at QT right now, and through their training, they have to acknowledge everybody twice coming in and out of the store, right? Part of it is so that the people know that we know you're here.
Right.
Christian, on the other hand, he's like Tigger on crack at Dutch Brothers, like, hey, how you doing? You know?
Yeah.
But they've taught in that so that you're creating an experience and a welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a big difference in, we've done, you know, cruises with the kids. We've done both Disney and we've done Royal Caribbean. Royal Caribbean's definitely for the older community, right? There's not as much experience. There's plenty of things. When you look at like what Disney does on their cruises for kids, it's ridiculous. Like, you pay for it and you're willing to pay for the experience. So I always take those lessons and go, okay, well, how does that apply in my day-to-day business?
Yeah. I mean, what's possible? Like, how do you make somebody feel ridiculously special?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, not a lot of people do it very well.
Very true.
I mean, and even sometimes people don't do it at all. I mean, I've worked with agents that, you know, in different eras of real estate where I literally had one client who did so many transactions and did no recourse in terms of pre or post follow up with any of their clients. And he told me, he's like, I'm never going to work with any of these people ever again. And I'm like, you absolutely won't. And that's not because it's your intention. It's just the experience that you're providing them. Right. But so I think it's super important too. I mean, at the end of the day, how you show up and how you treat others. I mean, we learned it in kindergarten, you know,
how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, Chris, I think just is the epitome of that. Is how he showed up today. You can tell that's how he does everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super legit.
Yeah. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it. We so appreciate you being here. We ask that you share, follow us, like us, 5-star review, and
I didn't get fired this week either.
You did not get fired this week. And you're in for a treat because the next episode, we're actually going to have the conversation with my boys.
Oh, yeah.
Christian and Chase are going to come into studio, and we're going to talk growing up in real estate from both sides of it, from being broke to losing everything to where they're at now and what they've seen.
I can't wait.
And what they're thinking about, because I had some really deep conversations with both of them about whether or not they want to get into the business. So the conversations are starting to happen.
Yeah, I can't wait.
And it'll probably be a two-parter because, number one, they're both clowns like I am.
Gosh.
But I think it'll be a really good conversation for you guys with kids or teens or people, you know, because that's
or
how
people.
or people, yeah. People, it's...
What about animals?
Animals, dogs, dos tres.
Yeah.
It'll just be a really good conversation because that was kind of where it came from for me.
Yeah.
You know,
it's going to be fun to ask them some questions about their dad.
Be nice, Bernie. Be nice.
So can't wait.
Be nice.
So can't wait.
All right. Till next time.